Welcome to the Living Quadratos podcast and this table of friendship. If you've found that you've moved away from church or religion for whatever reason, or maybe you're exploring the idea of a spiritual life, we hope that you'll find the Living Quadratos podcast a place of freedom and safety. So whoever you are, whatever your tradition or no tradition, and however you find yourself today, you're welcome here. We're also here to explore the everyday practices of Quadratos, which is the name that we give for a universal pattern that lives in everything. And we want to share how Quadratos is at the very core of Jesus' teaching, and to hear from people about how they're using Quadratos to enliven their lives. I'm Bronwyn Thorogood. I'm a Quadratos practitioner, and I'm joining you from Newcastle, Australia, where I live on Awabakal land. And with me is our co-host Alexander John Shire, author and founder of Quadratos. And also, I'm excited to say we're joined by Dom Fay, who's comedian, sportscaster and chaplain from Brisbane, Australia. Yay for Australia! Who will share about how he's using Quadratos with adolescents and with young adults. But first, Alexander John, can you share with us where you are coming from today and how are you anyway?
Thanks, Brian, and welcome, Don. And I am coming from the brilliant northwest coast of Spain, where today it is summer. The sun is shining so bright I can hardly see the screen. We have waited long for such a day. And this land on the coast of Spain is the ancient origin land of the Celtic world. I don't know that people realize that this west coast of the Iberian Peninsula is where the very first cultural findings of the Celtic world exist. So from this place on the planet to wherever you are, welcome. And I'm really glad that you're here with us. Bron, would you help us sort of stop and ground for just a moment?
I would love to. If you would strike the gong, that would be great. I'm mindful that you might be listening to this podcast while you're driving or walking or doing some other activity where it's not safe to actually stop and close your eyes. So I'm just inviting you to modify and adjust this pause to accommodate your circumstances. So wherever you are and whatever you're doing, take the time to pause in this moment. And if you're able, allow your eyes to close softly and join me in taking this journey inwards. Let's take 3 deep breaths together. Inhale slowly through your nose, filling your belly, your chest, and exhale completely, releasing any tension that you've carried into this space. Take the next 2 breaths in your own time, and with each breath, feel yourself arriving more fully here. Now allow your awareness to go to the natural rhythm of your breath as it flows in and out of your body without trying to change it or modify it. Simply observe that gentle rise and fall of your chest, the cool air entering through your nostrils, the warm air as you exhale. Just take a moment now to bring your mind to a place that is calm and beautiful. Maybe it's by the beach or in a sacred space, in the mountains, rainforest, near a waterfall. Rest there for just a moment, feeling the gift that it brings your heart. In a moment, Alexander John will strike the gong, which is our invitation to effortlessly just come back into this space together. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest this week, our fellow Australian. Dom Fay is a beautiful friend of Quadratos, and among the many things that he does, he's one of the co-hosts of the podcast On the Way, on which Alexander John has been interviewed many times. Today, we've got the opportunity to interview Dom, though. In listening to On the Way the other day, I learned that Dom takes his students from his school on extended excursions, using the work of Quadratos to help experience the awe of the natural environment. So we're really anxious, Dom, to learn more and how this connects so well to our previous Living Quadratos podcast about the practice of engaging with beauty and awe. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Bron. Thank you, Alexander John. I am a little bit bewildered and baffled by all of this, really. I can't quite believe I'm on Alexander John Shire's podcast after the amount of times he's graciously been on my podcast. This is a real treat.
Well, it's a
So
treat for
Dom,
us too.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
Dom, where are you in Australia? What land are you on?
So I am in Brisbane. Brisbane is on contested land between two tribes, the Yagara and Turrbal people,
Hmm.
which those who aren't in Australia may not quite have a full understanding. I know, Bron, you've spoken a bit about it and about your situation, but that the land is certainly carries the stories with it. And I am in the suburb of Coorparoo, which is a very indigenous sounding word itself. So it's sort of in the southeast of Brisbane, the 2032 Olympic city. So if you haven't heard about Brisbane yet, give it 6 years and the rest of the world will discover the Australia's third biggest city up here. So generally a very humid, very hot, subtropical environment, but at the moment a nice cool change coming through. So that's sort of where I've always lived and yeah, my part of the world.
mhm.
Well, I know that part of your work, or maybe it's your main work, is being a chaplain. But tell us just a moment about the other aspects of your comedy work and sportscaster. Maybe you're gonna
Sure.
be broadcasting the Olympics.
Look, I'm pretty niche. I'm reserved to just one sport these days, Australian rules football, which any of our listeners today outside of Australia have probably never heard about. But if you search Australian rules football on YouTube, you can have your eyes open to the most confusing and bizarre sport on planet Earth. So I grew up. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in Brisbane. I was the son of a Baptist pastor. My dad was a Baptist pastor when I was younger, in quite a conservative evangelical flavor. And like all kids, that's all I knew. That's all you know, your own experience. But I left it in my mid teens when my dad went through burnout, and I had started to have, I suppose, many questions and concerns about the faith tradition I was in, and I felt like I wasn't allowed to bring my brain to the table, and my brain wouldn't stop asking questions, and so one thing led to another, and I was out of the church. And at that point, my greatest hope, my greatest dream was to be a a comedian. In Australia, there is a comedy duo, Hamish and Andy, who are very well known. There's sort of versions of them across the world. Everyone has their own version of Hamish and Andy, I suppose. But they, when I was growing up, were the comedy duo. And I remembered thinking, imagine if for your job you could tell jokes with one of your good friends every day and bring some lightness to people's lives. Wouldn't that be a gift? And so I pursued that through stand-up comedy and then into radio and sketch comedy, and did that for a number of years. Around the same time, I started a Aussie Rules podcast about my team, the Brisbane Lions, with an AFL journalist here in Brisbane. And I was following this sort of media pathway, and there were many good things about it, but there was also, I suppose, an ache that was unanswered. And I think it was about 3 months after getting my dream job, a national show on one of the radio networks here, that the buzz had worn off. And I drove home at night after the show, and I thought, I'm in trouble here, because I've been on this relentless chase for maybe a decade, since my high school years to that point, to reach this point of success, and it has not fulfilled me in the way I hoped it would. And so I suppose that led to a bit of a spiritual re-engagement. I met some of the Brisbane Anglicans at the time and was blown away by their social justice heart. I also remember going to an Anglican service, and they would say, "We proclaim the great mystery of faith around the Eucharist," and I just, it was like a balm to my soul to hear a worshipping place not try to answer the mystery or reduce it to 6 points that you need to know for a better financial life, but just to say the great mystery of faith. And so anyway, long story short, I sat by Lake Wanaka in New Zealand on the South Island in 2017 at dusk. And this whole journey, I suppose, led me to a point where I encountered my own Genesis 28:16 moment, the surely the Lord is in this place and I did not know it. And ever since then, the Faith podcast on the way sort of kicked off, and that led to an opportunity speaking at a school, which led to a job at a school, which ultimately led to me being in Spain with Alexander John Shire at the start of 2023. I think was the first time we met, and you show me around your part of the world. So I don't know, like all lives, it's unfolded in a bizarre, messy, mysterious, and sacred way.
So I have to admit, for all transparency, yes, Dom has visited in Spain and we have traveled together a bit, and I look forward to more in this year. But Dom, tell us about the students you work with. And well, I guess tell us how you came to Quadratos.
Yes. Yeah. So I was already working in the chaplaincy space. This was in 2021. I was very new. It was my first year. I had no idea what I was doing. And I kept wrestling with this question. Is there a way to bring the life-giving faith that I have tasted into an institutional Christian private school context? Is that actually possible, or is the institutional weight too heavy? And I was not sure how I felt about it at the time, if it was or wasn't possible. But then, and I know this is a common story, in Quadratus, a personal crisis of my own. In 2021, I went through the most difficult first path experience of my life when an engagement that ended. I was engaged, and it quite unexpectedly ended. I think I was 28 at the time, and I'd probably grown up in churches where people were getting engaged and married at 18 and 19. And so 28 felt like I'm really off the edge of the cliff here, and it hasn't happened for me yet. And so when that ended, I thought, oh, maybe this isn't going to happen for me. And it led me into November of 2021 was the deepest darkness I've encountered. And it was around this time that a friend of mine who was familiar with Alexander John's work and with Quadratus said, "Have you heard this version of the Christmas story?" And it was the original Christmas work that is part of Quadratus, that the deep darkness is not where life ends, but where life begins again. And I remember the first time I heard Alexander John on a podcast when a friend sent it to me to listen, um, just almost not being able to focus on the road in front of me because of how much my mind was being blown and how much my soul was being given exactly what it needed, not to make it all better immediately, but to just even begin to believe or dream that what felt like a great final ending might in time prove to be an unfolding and an opening.
And I forget which year that was of the Robcast, but it'll be down in the link if people want to go and hear that Robcast on
Yeah.
Christmas. But from that, how did you discover this work with your students?
Yeah. So the 2022 school year began, and I had spent most of December 2021 and January 2022. I hope this doesn't sound slightly obsessive, but I reckon I spent 7 or 8 hours a day with your work, Alexander John. I found whatever kind of book I could find. I found whatever audio book, online courses. I was I was in such desperate need, and
Mm,
this was the only pathway that felt viable to bring me back to life.
mm,
And I would just spend hours with the work and writing various lines down. Um, there are so many of these lines that are still burned into my mind, and it was like water in the desert. It was keeping me alive. And then the school year starts, and I'm thinking, how do I have a school year in me? I'm barely standing at the moment, and now I need to start a whole school year in a job I still don't know what I'm doing in. And I run our senior chapel services at the school. And I thought, well, we have 4 terms here at the school, and I present a weekly chapel service. And I thought, well, there seems to be some synergy here. I wonder if the theme for the year could be the fourfold path of Quadratus.
Mm.
Um, and I reckon at that point, I remember thinking, I reckon I'll be good for term one because I certainly know how to talk about autumn. I'm pretty sure I can do term two. That'll be winter. I did have some worries about term three, but I thought that's going to be a July, August problem. We'll see how I'm going then. I was probably a bit like the end of the Gospel of Mark. I was talking about a resurrection I hadn't yet witnessed when it got to term three. But I just remember putting together these weekly messages. I remember doing the Easter service in 2022 at the end of term one, and this is autumn in Australia, so the timing was perfect. And I did the Easter service based Alexander John on your work on the Gospel of Matthew and the first path and the necessity to greet the betrayer. I greet the betrayer with the kiss and say, "Friend, do what you have come to do." And uh, I felt like week by week these services I was speaking to myself almost more than anybody else. Um, and it was remarkable because the students, I mean, I wasn't talking about ideas that you agreed with or didn't agree with of, you know, God and salvation and whatever else, but I was talking about this pattern, this cosmic universal pattern that they could all see in their lives.
Mm.
And so I'd have students coming up to me saying, "That reminds me of when my parents got divorced," or "That reminds me when my dog died," or all kinds of different things. And suddenly it was like they were seeing the faith space, the chapel space, as their human space.
mm,
And anyway, that ultimately culminated in later that year. I was talking to a colleague who I've sort of shared the journey with at the school, and I said, it feels like there's only so much you can do in a school hall on the northern Gold Coast on a Tuesday afternoon. I wonder if we took students out to some of these places where your jaw drops and your soul opens and you encounter. And we created the first ever, what we call the desert retreat, where we took some interested students to Alice Springs and Uluru and sort of framed this retreat around the fourfold path, which is sort of how it lives on today, that we take a group of year 11s out there each year and we sit on a hilltop in Alice Springs and watch sunset and share stories of endings with silence and stories of letting go. And then we sit around a fire late into the night and share stories of the second path. And then we get them up ridiculously early the next morning at about 4:30 so we can get up there while the dawn is still dark
Mhm.
and watch the light as it breaks and talk about the third path. And then we gather together for the fourth path at midday. So this pattern, this four beats, has become the central part of everything we do.
Well, and just to help our listeners or people who are watching with us, what's this age group?
Yeah, so year 11 in Australia is about 16, maybe 15, 16-year-olds.
Okay.
Um, and then we take year 12s, which are your 17, sometimes 18-year-olds, off to New Zealand for a similar kind of awe and wonder retreat every winter. And while we don't explicitly do the fourfold path there, they're often the students who have done that in the desert the year before. And so it leaks all through that experience as well.
And what do you find that's touching them? I know you in some ways you've already given us a
Mm.
taste of that, but
Yeah. I mean, my hunch at the moment is that we aren't, I don't sense, at least in my part of the world, much hunger for more intellectual content in terms of we don't just want to wrestle with, well, that's an interesting idea. What about this part of it? And end up in debates and
Mhm.
theory. And my hunch is that we have lost our communal spaces in the world. You know, we've lost our places where people would come together and share story and be soul to soul. We are so isolated in so many ways, and these students have grown up only in that world. They have never known a world before it. You know, some of their lives have largely been lived on phones, on devices, in their own bedroom, in the suburbs. And so when you take them into the wilderness and you open up the space for them to notice this heartbeat in their own life story, to name what's been going on the whole time, and to say, you're not alone. Not only are you not alone because this circle exists, but you're not alone because all of humanity has gone before you and all of humanity stands with you in this. It's such a beautiful awakening that you see in them where it moves me to tears most years, to be honest, because it's like you genuinely can see this sudden awareness that sadness in me isn't that within me which is broken, but it is actually the connection point that I have to all of life. And yeah, it's quite funny because now there's a few years of alumni who just in conversation when you see them, they'll say, they'll just drop phrases like, yeah, well, I'm walking through an unusual kind of winter at the moment, but you know, I'm keeping an eye out for the third path. I know it'll emerge, and it's almost become this second hand for you know, dozens, if not hundreds of students and former students on the Northern Gold Coast. And it's a shared language they use amongst each other now as well, which is wonderful.
this really is one of the things that I most hope might happen with Quadratus is that it would become a common language. It's like
Yes.
we
Yeah.
we get a like-minded community, not that we're going to be cookie cutters, but we have a shorthand for if I just say second path or Gospel of Mark or crossing the stormy sea, it's like immediately we know what the experience is about, or we know more about
Yeah.
what the experience is.
And I think on that as well, Alexander John, um, the Western framework, you know, that we inherited from the Greeks that does run it all, which, you know, I'm really just plagiarizing your own work back at you here. But anyway,
Please.
the but that whole idea, it's certainly what I've grown up with, and it's what I see our young people have grown up with, which is that the world is split down the middle between good people, bad people, successful lives, unsuccessful lives, and perhaps in its most simplistic form, um, people who things have worked out for and people who things haven't worked out for. And so if you go through a tragedy in life, you've slipped to the wrong side of the divide.
Mm.
And it's really fascinating to me to see in these young people as they share their stories and hear each other's stories this awareness that I haven't fallen to the wrong ledger of anything. I have been invited in to the exact rhythm that life itself is. And in fact, some of them have even been able to point out, this would sound bizarre to many people. I realize that, but I've had some students point out that they almost feel a odd sense of compassion for other students who haven't encountered a first or second path yet,
Mhm.
because they almost look at these people who've perennially lived their lives in the third and fourth path, or maybe just in sort of this almost an overripe kind of almost rotten simple life where nothing has really been notable yet, and they feel compassion for the depths of their own being that they haven't
Mm.
experienced.
Mm.
That's incredible.
Mm. It's so interesting. It's like having come out of the depths of the U.S. South in the 1950s. I can't imagine people who've not yet experienced a first path. Um,
Well, and,
but I,
and perhaps, yeah, it might be worth, for a bit of context, the particular part of Australia that I work in on the Gold Coast, it's sort of considered Australia's Florida a little bit, which might help
mm,
some American listeners. So coastal, warm temperatures, people go there to retire, mansions and comfort and luxury. And it is almost like a place for people who have perennially been chasing summer and wanting to avoid all other realities of life.
mhm, mhm,
And the students I work with are the kids of those kinds of families often. And so to them, for many of them, this idea that we're going to sit around and cry together, weep together, sit in silence together, it's almost like a soul that has been um, in standby mode is finally allowed to breathe and come to life.
right, right. Ron, I realize that you have a background in education and I'm not sure what level of school were you working in?
I was in special education,
Ah,
so I worked, but the last job that I had was principal of a school for students who had anxiety, depression, and trauma, like PTSD, up to year 12. So from year 3 until year 12. But also the other school I was principal of was a teenage parents school, and so they, this was a population of traumatized young people, and I mean, I wasn't able to bring Quadratus work into this work. Number one, because I didn't know about it when I was there. I learned about it when I was going through a very bad, like a very difficult first path journey. But this explanation, because it was a Christian school that I was working in, and this explanation of the first and second path for these students would have made extraordinarily good sense,
hmm,
and without and it just released them from feeling like there was something wrong with them,
hmm,
that they would have, like you said,
Yes.
Dom, they would be able to see that this was them fitting into the flow of every human,
hmm,
and
Yeah.
and that would have been a beautiful gift to have given them, especially the teenage parents who had given birth to a baby, at 15, 16, 17, and whole and at the time of giving birth to that baby, where everybody was telling them that it was a disaster, they knew this was my new life. This was my new chance. I am going to change my life so that my child won't have the same life as me. So it was the perfect picture of how the darkest moment actually brought the greatest light into their lives. And when I meet those young people now, they're nurses, social workers, they're NDIS workers, which is disability. They've got their own NDIS business. They own their own homes. They are married. Like, it's just incredible. And yet they'd be the first ones to say, I was nothing
hmm,
before I came to school,
hmm,
to our school, which was, so to have given them this gift of understanding the four paths is just the eternal cosmic cycle, they would be able to fit everything in their life around that and see how how loved they really were right through all of it. Mm.
Mm.
So one of the things that excites me and keeps my passion going is hearing from people like we did earlier, Ron, when we talked with Lance Carter, who's taking the
Yes.
work of Quadratus and it's helping inform his 12-step work that he does.
Yes.
But Dom, for you, what would you say to other people who are working in this, in what we would say in the US, the high school age or young adult, how to begin applying Quadratus for people in those age groups?
Well, in my experience, I think that's an extraordinarily important question because I think it is the richest, deepest, most relevant, and engaging way of exploring the mystery of faith with a young populace who have largely left the search behind, or at least intellectually they think they've left the search behind, but the soul knows it still wants something. It just doesn't quite know what to do with it. And I think one of the difficult things probably is that it requires a level of um, vulnerability that is beyond the usual academic framework. Certainly in Australia, I'm not so sure about the United States, but the whole academic framework effectively works on the teacher is the expert, the student is the beginner, and the expert who has figured it out is now going to tell the beginner what they need to know to figure it out. And the thing about Quadratus is we are all on this path spiraling constantly deeper. And so to really unpack Quadratus, there's sort of is an awareness that you're almost saying to your students, hey, I have and perhaps am currently and certainly will down the track go through this many more times myself. I am as much in this 4-beat rhythm as you are. And I think in a sense that is one of the challenging things is it's very rare for a teacher or someone who works at a school to feel able to say to students, I haven't mastered this.
Mm.
I am living it. I'm a fellow seeker. I'm also living this. But let me tell you what I've found that has helped me frame it. And so I think beginning by allowing the space appropriately and safely, obviously, but to be vulnerable and to be another human in front of humans, um, I don't feel, maybe I'm speaking out of school here. My sense is Quadratus wouldn't be especially engaging in a school as an academic discipline where we sit down and, you have to read this enormous textbook and write 1,500 word essays on everything. And like, I'm not sure the academic side of it, while it could be interesting, that's not the gift of Quadratus. So, sitting in a circle, maybe you can't go on a trip like I have to the desert, but sitting in a circle, sitting and watching a sunset late in the day at the school, and sharing story of this fourfold path, to me, I think is the way to bring it to life and to almost look every student in the eye and say, hey, me too.
Mm.
Well, I'm so aware that the book Heart and Mind is pretty it's in depth and in some ways it's dense. This is not a book that you're going to give someone in their teenage years and say, sit down and read this. Uh, but if a chaplain or a teacher will integrate the material and then invite others to the experience, whether it's the experience of the seasons
Mm.
or or sunset, nighttime, dawn, and day, and to know that in that cycle is the pattern of everything.
I think one of the things that actually positions schools to be extraordinarily well placed to do this work is that schools are grounded in cycles and rhythms already.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So many workplaces, you can go and get a job as a lawyer or an accountant, and you can walk into a building and walk in and out of that same building for 27 years. And you sort of can almost lose track of what month it is. And, maybe when the big financial points are in the year, but outside of that, you sort of aren't, you're detached from any seasonal rhythm in a sense. You're just kind of day after day after day. Whereas schools are constantly in flux. I mean, every year is this rhythm, the Quadratos rhythm, the fourfold path, lived out through new students getting to know themselves and being a bit overwhelmed and scared of where they are in the new year level and is it beyond them, moving into this second path experience of I've lost what I had and perhaps I don't know what's happening there, and then I've now got a sense of it and here we go, and now I've sort of really known who I've become here and I'm ready to give back. And then the school year doesn't let you stay in the fourth path for another 10 years. It jumps you to the next year level the next year, or the next campus or into graduation. And so people at school, students and staff, and to an extent families as well at schools, I think they're already grounded in a cyclical, rhythmic
Wow.
way of life, much more than our usual culture. So I actually think it works really well to speak right into, if you talk to a group of students or teachers about the difference between term 1 and term 3, they will be able to tell you what those two terms feel like and how they feel different. So in a sense, you're already off and running.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a good
I'd
point.
never thought of it that way, but it's so true. I'm just
Mm.
thinking back to my school years and that rhythm that you get into, and that at the
Yes.
end of the year, there's a short pause and then it's got to start all over again.
Oh, and that every single year, at my school, we say goodbye to, and so do the students below them, to 100 odd young adults as they graduate out into the world. They don't come back. They go out into their lives, right? So, in a sense, you the structure itself enforces you in a helpful way, I think, to face this rhythm of loss and renewal on a constant annual cycle.
Mm. Can what I love about that too is it's an inner journey. It's not just the external pressures of exams and homework, and it's actually getting them to go inwards and explore those emotional sensations that they have but are not aware about what they actually are, and then putting them in the context of the four paths it gives them such a base, like a foundation and language to take through to the rest of their life. Like it's
Mm.
such an incredible foundation for young people, because we don't teach that actually very well in schools,
Yeah.
other than that. I don't think anyway.
And I want to, if anyone who's listening, if you are working with young people, young adults, uh, this is a whole new area that we would love to explore with you, or just to sit and listen and help you get a few touchstones. Uh, Quadratus can be one of the most incredible processes to help us know how to live the pattern of life, not just once, but to learn the pattern so that we know how to apply it for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we hope is to have it on as a guest in the near future are people from the All Terrain program in the UK. And this is a program that's being offered by Salvation Army. I was greatly surprised. They brought me there to do an initial training with their team. But Dom, somewhat like you, although this is a year-long intentional process for young adults, they take them away to 4 different topographies in the UK. And
Mm.
in each one of those topographies, they explore that gospel in a very Christ-centered or Christos-centered approach, but
Mm.
also as a spiritual path.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is from 18 to 22. And the reports coming back are absolutely phenomenal about what this is doing for them. And so I am very uh, excited, I don't delighted, beyond my wildest dreams, and yet a hope that Quadratus can be the type of teaching which isn't dogmatic, but is very practical and actually enriches people's lives.
Mm.
Oh, and I think if you ask any chaplain, what do you most want your students to know, it would be that you are loved,
Mm.
that it's all going to be okay, and that it is wonderful that you're here. Now, you can say that as much as you want, but where that goes off the rails for young people, I think, is they go, but if I was loved, why has this bad thing happened to me? You hear that all the time. Or, if it's all going to be okay, it doesn't feel like it right now. And so Quadratus, I think, is this extraordinary gift that actually allows young people to realize that maybe hard things aren't happening to them because they aren't loved or because they can't trust that they are loved, but because this is the pattern of life. This isn't a departure from life. This is life. And the love of God is not the thing that's just there on the happy days when it all goes well, but is the exact thing that walks with you right now as you try your very hardest to loosen your grip and let go of the thing you never thought you could live without. So I find Quadratus just profoundly helpful for actually just the core calling of any chaplain, just opening up that mystery that you are loved exactly as you are, right here, right now, and always.
Mm. And that would be an incredible support to teaching staff to know that the chaplain is doing all of this work so that when students are experiencing difficulty with their academic work, they've got a cycle to
Yep.
to fall back on to say, I'm not a failure, like, this is hard. So, like it would be such a gift in a school to have it.
Yeah, and I think one of the tricky things, Bron, is that our schools, like our Western world, they run on this idea of exponential growth and charts that just trend upwards
Yeah.
constantly, and this belief that, well, you got a B last year, so you need to be getting an A now and then an A plus.
Yeah.
There's not much room for fall and rise, and there's not much room for 2 steps back, 3 steps forward. There's not much room for this rhythm. And that is actually something I've had to talk with staff about a few times, some teachers, because they'll say to me, this student of mine went on one of these retreats and their grades have gone backwards since they got back. And I don't understand it. Aren't these retreats a helpful thing? Why would their grades have gone backwards? And I've had to say to them, that there's a whole lot in that conversation. One thing might be that it's possible what was fueling them to good grades was something that was also wounding them deeply, and that maybe that fuel source has been taken away from them, that need to prove themselves, and they're encountering they're good enough, and they'll just take a bit of time to find a renewable fuel source, not one that's going to destroy them from the inside. But also just to understand that the way nature produces anything, if we want our students to produce their best in the world, whatever you mean by that, and I certainly hope people mean the best of that, not this sort of extraction mentality. But if we want our students and our young people to produce their best and live their best into the world, we'll look at any plant, and half of the year that plant is retreating and going inwards and dying before it comes back again. I mean, and the thing is, we live in this part of the world, a very big gym culture. And so they know this. They know that you break down muscle to grow muscle. This is a pattern that is already at play within their world, but it just is at odds with the exponential growth, constantly trending upwards chart that runs the economic world of the West.
We we need to come to a close here, and I just want to remind people again that down below in the links, you can go to the Quadratus website. You can order the big book, Heart and Mind. But also we have an 11 session sort of fundamental overview of the Quadratus pattern. And if you are interested in maybe bringing this work to another group, sign up for one of these 11 session gatherings is to really get that first level grounding in the pattern. Dom, I don't know, there's so many things that you've said and so much that you've offered us that's an absolute jewel. Is there a way that you'd like to close us out?
Oh, well, I mean, I suppose for me, I just have the most profound gratitude for you, Alexander John, and for the work of Quadratus, because and maybe everyone listening has something they can think of in their life like this, but sometimes in life, precisely the right thing arrives at precisely the right moment. And I could not imagine how I would have made it through what I was moving through without this work. I felt like I was lost in the deep dark wood and never coming back.
Mm.
And to discover, to have somebody show me the map and say, no, that's right. You are in the deep dark wood. That is part of the cycle. And you keep walking through the deep dark wood. That's how you get to the other side. To me, it saved my life, quite bluntly, but it's also given me not only life, but reason for life. So I am so grateful to the work for what it's done for me, so grateful to the work for what I've seen it do for so many of the young people that I work around. And I'm just so excited to see this life-changing, transformative journey shared more widely so people can realize they are part of a cosmic sacred pattern that is going to keep moving through the cosmos for the rest of reality and time itself.
Thank you
Beautifully
so
said.
much. And I know that Brian and Dom, you're both in Australia. You are now in winter.
Yep.
So your outer season is teaching us the great truth that darkness is not how the world ends. Darkness is how the world begins again. And thank you.
Yeah.
Go
Thanks,
well.
Dom. Thank you, Dom.
Cheers.
Cheers.